You're listening to the Jacob Media Sports Network in partnership with AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Subscribe to the Jacob Media channel on YouTube for access to all daily sports content.
Yes, sir. Welcome back, everyone. We're live in the Prop Swap Studios, AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. It's already Thursday night, man. I don't know what that means, but the week has gone by fast, just like it always does, and we are inching closer to the NFL divisional round. But are the Eagles inching closer to figuring out who their guy is, a.k.a. who is the next head coach, who is the replacement for Doug Peterson for the Philadelphia Eagles? So let's bring in the guy with all of the answers, all of the hot takes, and more. John McMullen. Follow John on Twitter at JFMcMullen, PhillyVoice.com, SI.com, and host of Extending the Play every Saturday, 10 a.m. to 11, right here on 1490. John, how are you tonight, my friend?
Doing well, Ryan. We got one off the board. Robert Saleh, minutes ago to the New York Jets, kind of as expected. And actually two, but only one for the Eagles. Urban Meyer going to Jacksonville. So we got 5 spots open left. And some of these hot candidates, as we talked about yesterday, Robert Saleh being the first one off the board. Eagles were never realistic in those sweepstakes. And, you know, we talk about Arthur Smith. I don't think that's realistic for them, to be honest. And then you start to sort of cobble away at it and see who's left and who's going to be here. And I think it comes down to, I hate to put it like this, but I think it comes down to who doesn't have options when all the other jobs are filled.
I've seen you tweet out a few times now, most recently just a couple minutes ago after that news broke. But you've been filling in the blanks a little bit. So why don't you fill in the blanks for, you know, your prediction on where these candidates could potentially end up?
Well, I mentioned Arthur Smith. I think he's going to go to Atlanta. I think he's going to end up there. He's going to be in the second interview for there. So he also had a second interview with the Jets. The Jets were down to sort of Saleh versus Arthur Smith. I think ultimately he gets the Falcons job. I think the Chargers are going to wait for Brian Daboll from Buffalo. Obviously, he's a hot candidate, and I've mentioned in the past that maybe the highest profile candidate from an offensive perspective, just from a pure scheme guy. People are really high on him because of what he's done with Buffalo and Josh Allen. And I think for all those guys, the Chargers are the best spot because of Justin Herbert. So I think he ends up there. Houston and Detroit are more wild cards. It's pretty clear Deshaun Watson wants Eric Bieniemy in Houston. And, you know, he's a pretty powerful player because if he wants out and you don't make him happy, it's almost like an NBA-like situation down there. They almost have to make the player happy or it's going to be a disaster. So ultimately, I think Bieniemy ends up there, and they wait. Could be till after the Super Bowl, obviously, if Kansas City goes where we think they're going to go. And Detroit just hired a new GM today, and he came from the Los Angeles Rams. So that's one team I haven't been able to get a beat on at all, and probably because they're going through both hiring cycles at the same time. So now they finally have a GM. Maybe that clears up a little bit. And you know, Brandon Staley from the Rams, the defensive coordinator, he's the one sort of really innovative hot candidate from the defensive side. And maybe that is a match because they're both coming from the Rams. So maybe that would make some sense. They also would have to lose in the playoffs before that could happen. And then that would leave the Eagles and what's left. And from what's left from what has been advertised as they've been interested in is, somebody like Joe Brady, who they interviewed, potentially, the offensive coordinator from Carolina. Gerard Mayo is going to interview tomorrow, but I find it very hard to believe they're going to hire him. Defensive-minded guy who's only been coaching for 2 years in New England. I think that's more due diligence for a coordinator position. And then guys who haven't been advertised as interviewing yet, Mike Kafka, who they had an interest in last season as an offensive coordinator, but were blocked from interviewing. Maybe he gets back into the race, and then Deuce Staley. I think it's becoming more and more likely that Deuce Staley might finally get the gold medal, so to speak.
John, what is the reputation right now in the NFL regarding the Philadelphia Eagles? Like, how are the NFL circles viewing Jeffrey Lurie and ownership, the front office? Because we all know how it's viewed here, but in NFL circles, what's the perception or the reality?
Well, I think there's two different ways to think of it, and I think from a front office perspective, the Eagles are still pretty highly regarded, the way they do things. But from a coaching standpoint, if you're a coach looking at this situation, I don't think it's highly regarded anymore for obvious reasons. I mean, it's pretty clear, not only from Doug Peterson, but it's pretty clear from how they're going about this process, that they're not going back to the Chip Kelly days. They're not going back to the Andy Reid days when the head coach had a lot of autonomy and at least a significant say in everything from the coaching staff to personnel. They seem to have gone, and they did go in a different direction with Doug Peterson. That's unquestionable. That's obviously well documented, and they seem to want to continue in that direction. So again, I've mentioned this from the get-go. If you're Robert Saleh, and I said this yesterday on the show, 6 of the 17 looking for a head coach interview. If you have options, you're not coming here. And people might say, and I know Eagles fans are going to say, well, the Jets are a joke. Yeah, I mean, on the field they're a joke, but they're going to give them some autonomy. And, they might have a quarterback, they might not, but if you don't like Sam Darnold, you can get another quarterback with the second pick in the draft, and they're in a better situation from the salary cap and all that standpoint. So you can say the Jets have been terrible for years and years and years and years, but they offer a better opportunity for a head coach today as we speak. What is today, January 13th, 14th?
14.
January 14th of 2021, they offer a better opportunity for a head coach in this league than the Philadelphia Eagles. And that might be tough medicine to swallow, but that's the reality. And anybody who has options. So if it works out, if it shakes out like I think it's going to shake out, Arthur Smith's going to have options. He's not going to come here. Brian Daboll, I don't even know if he'll bother to interview here. Why would he? Too highly regarded, too hot of a candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who has options isn't coming here. Now, the good news is there's a lot of good coaches, and there's only 32 of these jobs, and plenty of people will want the job. It's just that I always talk about that list. Everybody's working from the same list. You're not getting the top guys on that list. And it might not matter because all you got to go back is 2016. The Eagles wanted the top names on the list, couldn't get them, and it ended up better for them. So it's not like it can't work out. But if you're one of those fans that's going to be upset because you don't get the hottest candidate, well, you got to accept that for the way they're running this coaching search.
What are the Eagles on the hook for with Doug Peterson?
He's got 2 more years on his contract. So coaching contracts are generally offset. So if he were to get another head coaching job, that new salary would come off what the Eagles have to pay him. So ultimately, it looks like he's going to take a year off. So they're going to be at least paying him for another year. And then if he gets a head coaching job, if he comes back into it, it'll significantly pretty much wipe out probably that last year. But yeah, they're on the hook. I mean, as long as he's not coaching, and if he decides he wants to do something else, they got to pay him for 2 years.
Just one question about Doug, and then we'll get back to some of the candidates. Is there any chance that you could see him maybe taking a year off, and then, I don't know, let's say Eric Bieniemy, gets a head coaching job somewhere, which obviously is looking probable. Does Doug go replace him for a year and chill out and hang out with Andy Reid and try and win another Super Bowl as an OC, and then, set himself up for a better job? Or you don't see him taking any type of step back? He would just sit at home before doing that?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on how much interest there is. I think, if he comes back next season, I mean, he's taken some significant hits, and there is, there's 2 sides to every coin. And, in any divorce, there's 2 stories. And, the people who like Doug and the people who support Doug and the people who think he's a good coach have one side of that coin. And the reason the Eagles went in a different direction and what they're saying is the other side of the coin. So if people say, look, he did a bad job in his last year here, he ruined Carson Wentz, or however you want to frame the negative stuff, well, if that takes hold, he might have to build up his resume again. He might have to accept an offensive coordinator job if he wants to continue. And Doug's always been that guy, and he's always said he's not like Andy Reid. He's not a lifer. He doesn't plan on doing this until he can't do it anymore. So who knows? I mean, he might be just one of those guys who says, you know what, I want it. I want it. I want it as a coach. I want it as a player. Walk off into the sunset. There's a lot of options. But I know Pittsburgh was the first to, they moved on from their offensive coordinator, and, one of their writers threw out Doug Peterson. He certainly, I couldn't imagine he would be an offensive coordinator this year.
Right. Yeah, that would be surprising. It doesn't, it would be a bad look, I think, too, because he is just, his name, despite maybe how some people view him, his name, I feel like, holds enough weight that it's like, okay, well, he's a head coach. He's going to get another crack at it, or he's just going to chill for a year. Like that might be detrimental to his overall reputation if he just ran off to Pittsburgh behind Mike Tomlin as OC.
Yeah, like I said, I can't. The only reason, and that was pure speculation from the writer as well. It wasn't anything coming from his agents or anything about potential interest. It was just, a big name, and people throw it out there as an offensive guy, and they need an offensive coordinator. But yeah, I mean, I can't picture in 1,000 years knowing Doug and knowing, he'd rather just go golf for a year. And take some time off, and again, sort of recalibrate and see where things are in the next hiring cycle. And this league is trending in a direction where people are looking for the next Sean McVay, and it's been that way for a couple of years probably, and that's why you see some of these young guys, Joe Brady being one of them. Kellen Moore is another who the Eagles want to interview from the Cowboys, and I mentioned Gerard Mayo from the defensive side. He's 34. Brady's like 31, I think. Kellen Moore maybe 32. You see that, and the Eagles are kind of caught up in that, I think, a little bit. And we'll see. We'll see how they finish this search, and we'll kind of know for sure. I think there's one of two options. I think they're going to go that way because, again, you're talking about a young guy who doesn't have a lot of power, doesn't have a lot of options, and would have to accept these restrictions to be a head coach. Or, as I mentioned, Deuce would certainly accept those restrictions. And that's what I think the Eagles are working with right now. And, I've compared it to baseball a little bit. When baseball had that shift towards, why are we paying these high-profile guys these exorbitant salaries to be managers when we can just, throw out the analytics and the binder and hire these young guys and just basically tell them what to do. I think football is shifting at least a little bit in that direction. And if it continues to go in that direction, it might be a different landscape that he's not as valued as you would typically think a Super Bowl winner would be.
You mentioned anyone with options, that's anyone in the head coaching rumor mill, is not going to pick Philadelphia, and I agree with that. And I've said it just doesn't seem like an attractive destination right now. If you're a veteran head coach, if you're someone with cachet, if you have options, like you said. So how does that impact Philadelphia and their future? If they're going to get a young coach, how do they build the coaching staff around him, similar to what they did with Doug when they first hired him?
Yeah, it'd be pretty much a template of that. So you would get sort of those veteran coordinators who really don't have any juice in the head coaching circuit, so to speak, and maybe have been former head coaches, but you kind of know, like Jim Schwartz, are going to have a difficult time getting another head coaching position. And they're going to be veteran guys, and they're going to be in there to help the young coach. I think that's pretty much going to happen. Whatever. Obviously the Eagles are going to designate who these coordinators are going to be for this head coach. I think that's pretty evident. The only question is, Ryan, is it going to be a veteran guy there was a lot of speculation that the Eagles were trying to get Doug Peterson to hire Dan Quinn as the defensive coordinator. Would it be an ex-head coach like that or Steve Wilkes? Somebody like that, or would it be a Gerard Mayo? Offensively, obviously if you get a Joe Brady, it's not as important to get a play caller. So I think that is more dependent because we all know no matter what he says, Jeffrey Lurie is probably going to hire an offensive coach.
Let's talk about Kafka for a second, because just everything that we've talked about all week, John, ideally you want to try and potentially get someone off the air quotes Andy Reid coaching tree. Check there. Young guy who hasn't had a head coaching job. Check there. So let's pretend Mike Kafka could potentially be the next head coach. What does he bring? Would you like that hire? And how would you see that playing out?
I don't know if I'd like the hire because it's tough to say where Mike is in his coaching career. Obviously, he's a passing game coordinator in Kansas City, where in essence he's third in line. Andy Reid is the offense. Eric Bieniemy is the offensive coordinator. But even with Bieniemy, you know that's Andy's offense, and he's running it, and he's doing it. But you do kind of lean on, look, that's the best coaching tree of this generation. There's been so much success. You look at the AFC side of the playoffs. You look at the whole playoffs, and it's kind of watered down. There's so many people with Andy Reid connections. But if you look at obviously Baltimore against Buffalo, well, where did John Harbaugh make his bones? Where did Sean McDermott make his bones? And even Cleveland guess where Kevin Stefanski started? Philadelphia Eagles. Mm-hmm. Now, he wasn't as high profile as, say, a McDermott or a Harbaugh was, but the Eagles plucked him, gave him a start, and then he went to Minnesota with Brad Childress, another Andy Reid coaching tree. And it's just pretty amazing what his assistants have done in this league as a whole, and Doug Peterson being the most obvious. I think, in a lot of ways, though, I think the Eagles have a PR problem if they do the exact same thing. It's almost a carbon copy of Doug, although Mike's a little bit younger, and Doug was at least the offensive coordinator in Kansas City. So they might have a problem from that standpoint, but I don't think it's something they can't recover from. But the Eagles have this, no matter where they go, they have this PR hurdle because everybody knows, despite what he said, and Jeffrey Lurie said in his press conference, 25 years, I haven't changed. Well, we all know that's a lie.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's also impossible.
I mean, that's absurd.
Yeah.
Could you even imagine Jeffrey Lurie? Now, not in 1999. I mean, if you go back there, Andy Reid was that guy. He was off the radar. He was the Packers quarterbacks coach. Nobody was interviewing him. But even then, he didn't get involved nearly as much. But when Andy established himself, he had tremendous power in personnel and certainly his coaching staff. I mean, Jeffrey Lurie wasn't telling him any assistant coach he could hire or would have to fire. Wouldn't even dream of it. And then you go into Chip Kelly, who had tremendous autonomy as far as his assistant coaches, and as far as even before he won the battle, he had a big say in personnel, a big say. And then all of a sudden you get into the modern era, so to speak, with Doug Peterson. And part of it had to do with the sour relationship with Chip Kelly. And it's sort of the pendulum theory. You go the other direction, and they went in that direction. But it's pretty clear they want to continue with that. And Jeffrey likes it. And that's why they have a problem, because everybody, no matter who they pick, everybody knows it's going to be the same setup Doug just had. And you're going to have these same questions from pretty much day one. Like, is this your coach? Are you approving this? They're not getting past that. And that's an issue.
Don't they know that, John? Like, if I'm Jeffrey...
They should.
He just doesn't care? Like, what is it?
I think he doesn't care. I think he goes up and, look, like a lot of very successful people and very rich people, I think he's got, a lot of people around him who tell him he's great and tell him everything's fine and are not necessarily honest 100% of the time. Because if he doesn't know this, he's got issues. I will say that. And he seems, at least on the surface, he seems pretty oblivious to it. Maybe it's because he's in Florida. Because he's taking a lot of hits in Philadelphia.
I think he's gotten too much sun. That's the only thing I can come up with. I mean,
it's almost like, so many people, and look, I say it all the time. It is a difficult market. And so many people cover the Philadelphia Eagles. There are more reporters covering the Eagles than any other team in the NFL. And that includes New York teams, Chicago teams. That includes bigger market teams. And that's difficult to deal with. But I will tell you, and as somebody who writes about this team on a daily basis, there are so many hits Jeffrey Lurie has taken. You actually have to look around to make sure you're not using the same angle as somebody. I mean, everybody is coming at him. It's almost 100%. And that's rare, because you look at some of the other controversies and you got people start with the quarterback controversy. You have people in Carson Wentz's camp. You have people, and not by camp, I mean they think that should be the way forward. Others think Jalen Hurts should be the way forward. You can argue about who's better, who's got the bigger upside, all that kind of stuff. And it's sort of two camps, as I mentioned. I don't know anybody who has looked at, and I could be wrong, and somebody pointed out to me, if you know, I don't know anybody who covers this team on a daily basis that looks at what Jeffrey Lurie has done and says, wow, he's doing a good job. He's doing a good job here. It's not to say he's been a great owner in the past, but right now he's doing a bad job.
He certainly is. And, a couple more for John McMullen here. John, does it behoove the Philadelphia Eagles to wait, till after the playoff? Is there a better option for them? Or, how do you see it playing out as far as timeline?
Well, I mean, look, if you want a Mike Kafka, you're almost going to have to wait unless the Chiefs get upset, obviously. I mean, people do that. A lot of times, one of the things that has hurt Eric Bieniemy in the past is the deep playoff runs, because a lot of times teams don't want to wait, and it becomes tremendous public pressure to make a decision. And when guys, and that started today, as I mentioned, Urban Meyer was not in anybody's conversation except Jacksonville, so that one doesn't matter as much. But Robert Saleh was in everybody's building again. 6 of the 7 teams. So that starts that snowball, and it happens every year. And then other teams start to panic and say, "Oh, we better lock down, whether it's our second choice, our third choice, whatever. We better lock that down." And in the Eagles' case, remember, they started this late. They're behind the 6 other teams to begin with. Now, Jeffrey said he doesn't mind waiting. That could be for 2 reasons. That could be because he has his eye on somebody like Kafka, and he knows he has to wait anyway. So it doesn't matter. And all this other stuff is that public relations spin, and that's part of every coaching search. You do things for the public to say, we're doing our due diligence, but Eagles know who they want. This other stuff is just sort of window dressing, and that's every team. I'm not picking on them. That's how every team does this kind of thing. If they've decided we're just going to move forward with Deuce, this is a transition period, then they're probably just going through these interviews to say, okay, we talked to everybody, and Deuce is the best guy, and that's how they'll spin that. But they have a good idea what they want to do. And the timing depends on is the candidate they really want, is he available right now or is he not?
Time will tell. John McMullen will be there with us every step of the way, every night on The Fix at 10:30. Follow John at JF McMullen, PhillyVoice.com, SI.com, and extending the play every Saturday at 10 a.m. right here on 1490 Sports Betting Radio. John, tomorrow night we'll dive into all of the divisional round matchups and have some fun to wrap up the week.
Actual football. That's exciting.
It is exciting. It's a change this week.
It is. It's good to get away and decompress from these silly coaching searches.
Exactly. So we'll decompress tomorrow night on a Friday Fix. John, I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Ryan.
Yep, thank you. There he is, Johnny Mac. Johnny Mac. Good stuff from him, man. As always, he's just been dropping knowledge on us all week as it relates to this coaching search and all the latest news and notes surrounding the NFL and the Philadelphia Eagles. Robert Saleh off to New York, or North Jersey, we should say, to become the head coach of the New York Jets. We'll see where the dominoes continue to fall. All right, let's get into a break. When we come back, we're going to get into the second hour with Jeff Parles. Let's talk some football, baby. Some football that's actually taking place. NFL divisional round best bets coming up with Jeff.